Welcome to Across the Dietary Universe, a podcast where we bring experts along our voyage to discover the secrets of food and how it relates to each of our unique dietary profiles. From the origins of diets to current eating trends to the frontier of food innovation and the future of how we eat, we'll discover that when it comes to food, things are not necessarily as they seem. Honeycomb is a mobile app that works with your iPhone or Android device to help you find suitable food to eat at restaurants near you based on your specific dietary requirements. If you're plant-based and celiac, low FODMAP with a tree nut allergy, keto and dairy-free, we support countless dietary combinations and profiles. Based on your inputs, Honeycomb curates the best restaurants for you and the best options to order at those restaurants. If you have more severe allergies, don't worry. Honeycomb only recommends you places that have a clear protocol to deal with cross-contamination. Pre-order Honeycomb today at get.honeycomb.ai. Okay, Bay, it is awesome to have you on the Across the Dietary Universe podcast. When Marina, our VP of Operations, told me that we're going to be speaking to you and that your company is a company that creates low FODMAP, gluten-free, dairy-free, vegan sauces, soups, and gravies, I was very, very excited because I have a bit of history with low FODMAP. And, we should just jump into it. So I'd like to introduce everyone to Bay Burdett. She's an entrepreneur who started Bay's Kitchen, which is a low FODMAP, gluten-free, dairy-free, and vegan sauce, soup, and gravy brand. After being diagnosed with IBS and following a low FODMAP diet, Bay recognized the lack of ready-made sauces that were suitable to her new diet and launched her brand after a couple years of recipe testing. The brand is an award-winning and is now stocked in hundreds of supermarkets across a few countries. And one thing that I found out recently on your story, Bay, is that you just won an award.
Yes, it's been quite the 24 hours actually. We've actually just won. Well, we've won one award and been shortlisted for another. So, it's gone a bit crazy. But thank you for having me on this podcast. First of all, it's very exciting to be here and to be chatting with you. I can tell you more about the award. It was.
I'd love to know more about it. It's like a gut health award.
Yeah. So Food Matters Live is quite a big thing here in the UK. It's a big event that happens every year, although not last year due to COVID. It was all online and virtual. But it happens every year and it brings together lots of people from in the food industry talking all about innovation and why food matters. So it's often talking about specific ingredients, special diets and everything else. So to win the Gut Health Product of the Year award from them was just phenomenal. It was a dream come true because it's, like I say, it's such a prestigious kind of awards within the food industry, and particularly where we deal with special ingredients and special diets and things. It's really amazing to be recognized by them.
And do they have like a special committee that makes the decision? Is it based off of votes? How does the decision process work? Do you know?
It's a good point. I don't know how the shortlist works. I don't know whether that was a vote, but the final, so we made the shortlist, I think it was towards the end of May. And then in June, I had to present to a panel of judges. So they have some expert judges in the field of gut health. And there were 3 of us as finalists, and we all had to present to them as to why we believed our product should win and what we thought was so innovative and good for the gut about our product. So I did that a couple of weeks ago, and then found out last night that Bay's Kitchen won, which was phenomenal.
That's so brilliant. Well, I'm very happy for you. Where in because you're in England, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where in England are you?
So I'm based in a small town called Cheltenham.
Okay.
It's where we're very known for horse racing here.
Okay.
But it's about an hour and a half outside of London. It's kind of just south of Birmingham.
Awesome.
Yeah, cool. Little country town.
So I want to get into the story. To me, the reason I created this podcast to begin with is, first of all, okay, we need to know about the technology that's happening in the food space. We need to know about the innovations that are happening, and not just code, not just software, but the products themselves, the food itself. And a lot of times when I go to restaurants, or I'll be talking with restaurants, I say, we're doing the exact same thing. Because at Honeycomb, we help people, no matter their dietary restriction or preference, find suitable food to eat. And when I go to the restaurant, I'm like, you're doing the same thing. You're just feeding the people, where we direct the people to you. And so to me, it's really important to not only understand the innovation, which is, one component that we'll talk about, but also the story behind the innovation. For me, and I was telling you sort of off air right before, in 2012, actually, I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis. And it took me actually like 3 to 4 years to actually get into remission. And trying all sorts of diets, getting the low-FODMAP diet, going through a process of having a laundry list of the do's and don'ts, and, speaking to dietitian multiple times. It's really, really hard. And that prompted me to start Honeycomb. And I want to sort of know a bit about you and get to know the story about you. And that's why our listeners are tuning in today. They don't care about me. They want to know about you. So let's hear sort of what caused you to go low FODMAP at the beginning. And for those who don't know, for listeners that don't know, can you give a brief explanation in your words of what a low FODMAP diet means to you?
Yeah, sure. So I'll start with the low FODMAP diet so that when I go into the story, it kind of makes a bit more sense.
Okay.
But low FODMAP diet was scientifically proven and researched by Monash University in Australia to reduce, and in some cases even eliminate, symptoms for about 75% of those who try it, specifically targeted towards IBS sufferers, so irritable bowel syndrome. However, I think there are more studies underway, and because symptoms are very similar, there are other conditions like ulcerative colitis where the low FODMAP diet can really help. So it's any kind of gut-related disorders, I guess, that cause symptoms like your bloating, your gas, your changes in bowel habits, all those sorts of things, that this diet can help. And it works by basically removing hard to digest ingredients. So things like onions and garlic, lentils, wheat, lactose, things like that go into your gut, but we all have different sensitivities to it. But those are particular ingredients that are really hard for the gut to digest. So they end up sitting in the gut, fermenting, and then it's the gases that come from that fermentation that then start to cause your bloating, your gas, your changes in bowel habits, your uncomfortableness. And so by removing those ingredients, it ideally should stop those symptoms from happening. I think it's important, I always try and say, to get some sort of medical advice and help. If you can get help from a dietitian, if you're trying to follow the diet, then that's really good too, because it is quite a restrictive diet. There are a lot of things on that low FODMAP list.
Yeah.
So try and get some help with it. But you effectively take all of the high FODMAP ingredients out of your diet for, everyone says it's different, but somewhere between 4 and 8 weeks.
Right.
Definitely no longer than 8 weeks, because long-term restrictive diets can have a negative effect on your gut anyway.
Right.
So you want to do it for a short period of time and then reintroduce as much as you possibly can. So up to your tolerance levels of all different foods, and try and get that variety back in your diet. So that's me waffling on for about 5 minutes about what the FODMAP
No, good. That's very
is.
educational.
There we go.
It's very educational. Honestly, for me, I haven't been on the low FODMAP. The thing with colitis is that you sort of oscillate through different restrictions. And when you're in a flare-up, it's much more restrictive. You recommend, they recommend low FODMAP. Then once you get into remission, you sort of have a, free pass again until you mess up and then have to go back into low FODMAP again. So it's very much an oscillation for people like me who totally suck at keeping their diet together, which is why I had to put a company together to do it for me. But anyways, please carry on and tell me a little bit about what caused you to go into this, sophisticated and sort of unheard of. I mean, not unheard of, but for the average folk, if you ask them low FODMAP, they have no idea what that is. So
what it is, yeah.
So what caused you?
So I still don't know if this is the exact cause of what started me to be unwell, but I used to eat anything and everything. And then I went on a pretty restrictive diet for my sister's wedding back in 2012. And it was after that when so after the wedding, I just started eating everything normally again. So I'd cut out everything like bread, pasta, pizza, all my favorite foods, and was just eating quite plain sort of salads, vegetables, plain chicken, that sort of things. But I did it for about a period of 4 to 6 months. So this is where I'm saying don't do the low FODMAP diet for a prolonged period of time without the help of a dietitian, because I believe this is what's caused the issue, where my gut microbiome would have changed so much because I did this diet for so long, that then when I started trying to eat all these foods that I'd eaten for all my life up until that point, I was getting horrendous symptoms. And I battled with them without doing anything about it for about 3 years, which is a bit crazy. But I would get everything from bloating to cramps, your changes in bowel habits, your fatigue, your back pain, your everything that goes with it. And flare-ups would be pretty regular, once a week at least, probably, but vary in how severe they were. And it got to, it was October 2015, and I remember it because it was a family holiday. I was away with my mum, my sister, brother-in-law, my nieces, and we were all on a beach, and they were all playing in the sea, having a great time. And I love to do that. I love to play with my nieces and, get involved with the kids and just be silly and enjoy family holidays and things. And I couldn't do any of that. I was lying on that beach in absolute agony, didn't know what to do with myself, was considering going to the hospital, the doctor. We were right over in Cyprus, and I was like, I need some help. I don't understand what's wrong with me. This is the worst one yet. This is ruining my life and stopping me doing the things I want to do.
Right.
And so that was my kind of catalyst, where I was like, I need to do something about this now. This isn't normal. I can't carry on just hiding these symptoms and pretending everything's okay, because once a flare-up's gone, everything's back to normal. You forget about it until the next one happens.
Did you go at that point or prior to that to a GI or anything? I imagine you did.
I did one of these food intolerance tests.
Okay.
At one point, which I have now been told by lots of dietitians are really not worth the money. And there's lots of research about why they don't work and things. But I did one, and it did pull out an ingredient for me, which is coconut, which I struggle with.
Okay.
It pulled out a few other things, which I have now found I'm actually okay with. But coconut, it did pull out.
Is it coconut, like coconut flakes or the coconut meat, or is it like coconut milk as well?
Yeah, it's all of it.
It's all of it. Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I can tolerate a bit. It wasn't like severe on the test, but yeah, it did come up as one of my triggers, and that is still true. But other than that, I didn't do anything. I didn't go to a doctor. Right. I didn't talk about it to anyone really.
So what happened after the aha moment at the beach where you're like, something's wrong with me?
I went back to the house we were staying in and rang my GP from Cyprus and booked myself an appointment for the day I returned, and went along and saw her. And she then started, I can't remember if it was that exact appointment, but we did some blood tests, which is where they look for dairy allergy, celiac disease, and a few other things I think they can rule out. And we discussed my symptoms, so they can rule out things like inflammatory bowel disease, so IBD, which I think is your collection of things like Crohn's and colitis and things. So we talked through all my symptoms, and they were ruling out those by that. So IBS is, to be diagnosed, it's basically a process of elimination. There's not actually a strict diagnosis for it. It's just checking off the list that it's not any of these other things, bowel cancers, all those sorts of issues, and then it basically comes down to, right, you've got IBS. And I was lucky that the doctor that I saw, she didn't know a huge amount about it, but she had heard about the FODMAP diet. And I wish I still had it, because I remember it to this day, but she gave me a Post-it note with the word FODMAP written on it, because I was like, FOD what? FODMAP. And so she wrote it on this Post-it note and gave it to me. And that was the extent of the information that I got, but she told me that should help. In the meantime, she did give me prescription for some medication to try and help with the flare-ups and things, but she said, go and try this, it's meant to be really, really good. And that was the first I ever heard of the
Wow.
FODMAP diet.
Excellent. Well, so I mean, you probably told your family, and they're like very confused of what's going on when you told them
yeah, just a tad.
I mean, no one's
My
heard of
mum,
it. I remember when it happened to me, like nobody has heard of it. No restaurants have heard of it. You go to the supermarket, no one's heard of it. So that's probably when you started to realize, okay, well, I need to eat food, and there is no food.
mm,
Is that right?
exactly. Luckily, it's slightly different now, where most people I speak to, if they haven't heard of it, then they understand it now. Whereas before, like, people would just never have heard of it. But most people now know someone, because IBS affects 20% of the population.
Right.
Most people know someone in their friends or family, if it's not themselves, that have got IBS.
Right.
And most people now who have IBS know about the FODMAP diet. So it is starting to get out there. Most people still don't know what it is, but they might have heard of the word FODMAP and get a bit confused. But yeah, I have found definitely over the last 5 or 6 years that knowledge is starting to get there.
It's coming slowly but surely. Slowly but
Yes,
surely. And
definitely.
I do
definitely.
see more and more investment into gut health, and I think, I mean, I have my theories on where it's going to go, and I'm happy to get to it later, but I don't want to miss out on, what was your initial reaction to starting the low FODMAP diet? Because now you sort of have it, you have the prescription, you know what you need to do. Now you're off to the races trying to feel better. And so how did that go for you in the first one? Was it a bit of trial and error before you got it right?
Well, first it was shock, because if you go on to the it's slightly different now, 6 years on, but at the time it went onto the internet, and when I typed in the FODMAP diet, luckily for me, the first thing that came up was Monash University, who developed the diet, and there was a list of foods on there, and I literally didn't know what to do with myself, because it was everything that I enjoy eating.
Right.
Things like garlic prawns are one of my favorite dishes ever, and I haven't eaten those in 6 years now. I was, just didn't know how on earth, I was ever going to remember all these foods that I couldn't eat. That was one of the biggest challenges. My memory is awful. So I was like, this is a ridiculous list of food that I can't eat. Then the next step was go to the supermarket and try and find some foods that were suitable. And that was horrendous, because, everything has got onion powder or garlic puree or anything convenient in the slightest. So I was having to make every meal from scratch, which is ridiculously time consuming. I was working long hours at the time, living on my own, and I was like, I just can't do this. And you do get completely defeated by it, and you just turn to almost back to the diet that got me in this problem in the first place, which is, I'll just eat a bit of chicken that I know is low FODMAP and a bit of this that's low FODMAP, and you end up sticking to just a few ingredients that you remember off the top of your head are okay, because otherwise you'd spend 4 hours in a supermarket trying to remember what bits you can buy that are okay.
So you would do that, and then I imagine it got boring very, very quickly.
Yes, definitely. So because it got so boring, I made the time, and I always say this, I'm not a chef, but I made the time to spend time in the kitchen to see, like, what could I prepare that made life easier? If I could prepare some meals and put them in the freezer, or if I could make some sauces or something that I could use to make my food more tasty and things, what can I do? So I made some of my own pasta sauces from some recipes, which all had onion and garlic in, which obviously I cut out, and I just threw in a few other herbs and spices and, you know, ingredients that I knew I could have. And whilst saying I'm not a chef, you know, they tasted all right. I was like, this is not bad. Got friends and family to taste them and things, and that's where the idea for Bay's Kitchen came. Was
Right.
okay, it can be done. You can have really tasty food whilst following this crazy diet. And doing all this research that I'd done after just being given the word FODMAP, I knew that, you know, a huge amount of the population were suffering the same way I was. So it wasn't just me that would want these products. So that was where the idea came for Bay's Kitchen. Was
Wow.
right, I can make these, so why, you know,
It's a
why
little
can't I
bit,
make
it's a little bit
properly
like,
and sell
yeah.
them?
No, it's a little, it rings a little bit like, you know, any of those eureka moment stories. But it's, you know, low FODMAP and tasting good never really went together before.
No.
It was always just like, well, you have to eat and be miserable now to save your gut. And that's how it was communicated to me. It's like, well, yeah,
Mm.
all the tasty food, like, forget about it. You're gonna have to very plain, very, you know, plain and tame food. Nothing exciting, nothing crazy. And when I saw one of your sauces, the green curry, right? I think you have the green. I love
Yeah.
green curry. Okay, and to see that, I mean, it just made my heart warm. I'm like, oh my god, this is. It's really neat. It's really neat that you have that. Um,
Yeah, well, it's one of those things where I worked with a development chef, and he loved the challenge of making sauces, which he'd done, you know, his whole career, but he suddenly had to make, you know, a jalfrezi curry that wasn't based on onion and garlic, and he was like, well, how am I going to do this? And he loved the idea of this challenge that he'd never had to do in his career. And so, yeah, it's exciting that you can make these kinds of things, but it also, I don't know, it kind of dawned on me that all of our kind of taste buds are completely masked by these really strong flavors of onion and garlic. And
right.
actually, when you take them out and you start looking at all the other flavors, you can make some amazing tasting food because they're not masked by these really overpowerful ingredients. So
Interesting.
that was really interesting for us
Were you
in our
inspired
development.
by are there like cultures that have food that they don't eat onion and garlic where you maybe look to them, or what, was there any place that you were like, well, how do we make things taste good without onion and garlic? I mean, you don't need to disclose trade secrets here, but uh, how did you figure it out? Like, what was the research and development process like? Or was a lot of it just like, you know, with the chef and then in your kitchen before when you were, you know, when you had your eureka moment? How did you manage that? What's the research process like?
Yeah, I guess so. It started with me messing about in my kitchen and just putting all these different herbs and things together, and I thought they tasted all right. I mean, you probably wouldn't put every single different herb in your spice rack together, but you know, I did. I threw
Yeah.
anything and everything in and thought, oh, hang on, this tastes all right. So it can be done. And when I went and found this development chef to work with, um, I knew that, you know, he had a lot more experience in putting flavors together than I did. And we spoke about it, and he said, no, it can be done. He's like, you've just got to be more clever with the ingredients you're putting in, but there's things like chives that you can use, which are low FODMAP but give you that onion flavor. And
Right.
you know, there's different tricks that you can use.
Okay.
It was actually afterwards he had another customer he was chatting to, and he ended up talking to her about me. And I can't for the life of me remember what religion it was, but there's a particular religion, and they are unable to eat onion and garlic as part of their religion.
There you
And
go. That's what I was looking
that
for.
actually came, yeah, that came afterwards. So it was, it was like, oh, okay. So it's not just people with IBS that these foods are good for. There's actually
Right.
this whole community
S-
who
s-
can't
So
eat it for
when you're
reasons.
presenting to investors, you have a big bubble that is people with IBS, and then a little small bubble of this religion of our target customers.
Yes, exactly. Do you know what? We haven't done that, but maybe I should.
I
There's
mean,
a
it
good idea.
might give a bit of a laugh to the investors and break the ice.
Yes, definitely.
I'm in full pitch mode right now with it, so I'm thinking of slide decks just running through my mind constantly. Um, cool. So, I guess from a I have some more like particular questions, but I want to answer like, the story questions as well, because then I want to get into some really cool futuristic stuff. But um, what were the biggest challenges? And you can put the entrepreneurial hat on now as far as the actual business. But what were the biggest challenges at the start? Because I imagine, like, how do you even go about selling this when the buyers probably don't even have never even heard of low FODMAP?
Yeah, so I'll come back to that question
Okay.
because actually we've been on a slightly strange journey compared to most food brands. I
Right.
think one of the biggest challenges was my lack of knowledge of the food industry. So I graduated with a degree in creative advertising and went into kind of a marketing career. So nothing to do with food at all. So the learning curve was steep to understand things like certifications, shelf life of products, recipe development, and the fact that recipes have to change quite dramatically to make them um, commercially viable. Whereas actually you can make lovely things in your kitchen, but
Hmm.
to actually make that in a factory would cost you an awful lot of money, and you wouldn't be able to sell it. So there are a lot of learning curves from that respect. Money as a startup, I have no idea how much money food startups really absorb, and lots of other startup businesses too. But yeah, in the food industry, it's no different. You need a lot of money behind you.
Did you raise like angel funding or venture capital at all?
Yes, we've got one angel investor on board now.
Cool.
So I did, me and my family put some money in to start off with. I've then got our commercial director now. He's a shareholder in the business, so he joined me and is employed by the company as well as a shareholder. And then we went out for investment at the end of 2019 and have an angel investor on board, which is great.
That's
But
awesome.
so
Congrats.
all of that was a massive learning curve as well. I didn't
Yeah.
realize you're going to need all of that and have to go and pitch to investors. And yeah, it's all been slightly crazy. In terms of actually selling the products, it's it started off easier and it's actually got more difficult, which is very strange. So I had quite a good email list that I built up before launching the products. So I had a good customer base of about 500 or 600 people before I'd even launched, and a couple of online customers, they're retailers that we still work with today, came on board at that point. And this was April 2018, and I went straight out to all the big supermarkets and everyone trying to get in, thinking, oh, it'll be fine, they'll want these products. And strangely enough, two of them did.
Wow.
So within 3 months, I had secured a listing with Ocado, which is the UK's biggest online grocery retailer. And it was just right timing with them.
Wow.
He wanted some low FODMAP products. He'd had two other brands contact him at the same time, and he was looking to put it into his range. So that was just the most amazing timing ever.
Wow.
And then with Morrison's, normally if you've eventually, it can be very hard to find out who the buyer actually is. They stay very kind of undercover because otherwise they just get inundated every day with hundreds of thousands of people
Uh-huh.
emailing saying take my product.
So how'd you
so
get the undercover
so
uncovered?
yeah, I I worked with a business consultant who had some connections, and she put me in touch with someone from Morrison's. And luckily, and this doesn't normally ever happen, but she not only said she wasn't the right person, but this is the right person,
Right.
but she also copied that person in. So I
Wow.
had that person's email address there and then.
Wow.
And an open chat with them.
It's very rare. It's
Um,
very rare.
it never happens at all,
Yeah.
and it's never happened since. So I got very lucky with Ocado and Morrison's.
Yeah.
And she again was putting in a low FODMAP range in the Morrison supermarkets. It took a year for that fixture to actually happen and be implemented in about 140 stores we went into. But we got the go ahead in August 2018, 4 months after launching
Wow.
our first three products, that yes, we'll stock you. So that all went brilliantly, and then since then it's been very hard to try and get into other places, and it's been the normal story of trying to get the right buyer, and yeah, it's a very, very competitive industry to get
Right. So
food
so
products.
now I imagine once you're in the first few places, you sort of set your benchmarks, and then when you go to new places, they're assessing you to a greater degree than when you're from start from zero, for example. Is that right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, they do that as well.
Yeah.
But that's once you actually get into conversation with them.
Right.
You know, a lot of the time you're just getting ignored
Yeah.
because they got so many people, you know, reaching out to them and things, and you've got to show why. The thing with retailers, and I never understood this before I came into this industry, and what consumers don't realize, because they, you know, will still message us all the time on email and Instagram saying, why can't you be stocked in my local Tesco, or
Hmm.
why can't you be stocked in this other Morrison store when you're in that one, sort of thing. And you don't realize actually how difficult it is to get your products on shelf
So
of
what can
retailers.
listeners do to help? Is it just keep sharing it, keep buying it? How do they help?
Everything, yeah. If they share it, so you're getting more awareness. If they keep buying it, so your sales grow, which you can then show to the retailers, and it also then gives you more money to do more marketing to show the retailers.
Right.
But also just asking in their local stores, if you keep badgering those stores enough for products, and you know, lots of customers are asking for the same products,
Right.
that gets back to, and even in smaller stores, that could be the decision maker you're talking to, and in larger supermarkets and things, that will go back to the buying team of, we are constantly asked for this product, can we stock it?
Right.
um, so that's one of the best things that consumers can do. But yes, it's brands would love to have their products on the shelves of every store
Yep.
possible, and it's just
Yeah.
yeah, you don't realize until you try to get your products in how difficult it can be and competitive it is.
Yeah, no, I grew up and my father had a spice company. We come from a Yemenite background, and so there's a very specific Yemenite type of spice, and he concocted it together, and he went to health food stores across the country and would sell them, and sometimes we'd have vacations that would be business vacations, so just road trips, door knocking on on health food shops trying to get the product in. And then eventually got the big supermarket and so on. But it's very, very difficult. There are many, many challenges to that story. And so I'm very aware from the trenches how that goes down at the very beginning. So, I
Oh,
take
that's a
my hat
great
off to you.
story. Does he
um,
still do that now?
no, no. Now
Run a spice
he's like
company?
semi-retired now. He has an online store that he does like they sell vintage household goods and something completely random.
Oh, okay.
Very, very interesting journey for time for another podcast maybe, maybe I'll have him on.
Yeah.
But I guess the question is for the ones that haven't heard of FODMAP, like, because I imagine there's still a lot of I can't imagine every single buyer that you're talking to knows FODMAP and has,
Oh
starting
no.
a range, right? Because if they were, I think you'd probably be on there.
Hmm.
But what do they just tell you? Like, oh, we haven't heard of it. We'll do research and get back to you. Is that the norm?
It's a bit like that. So for a big supermarket, you've got to kick someone else off the shelf, basically. They don't have
Ah,
ever expanding shelves. So
right,
you've got to prove your case of why your product deserves that space on that shelf more than something else. And so the issue that we have with having this really innovative product is the risk factor to them. they're like, well, what if people don't know FODMAP, and so people don't buy it, and so then I'm going to lose money for that shelf space when I've kicked someone off who maybe is making them some money. So that's the problem, is that it's the risk that they take to take on a new brand, to know whether it will sell or not. One way that we have adapted to the feedback we've had from buyers is by certifying ourselves in other areas as well. So we've made ourselves gluten-free, dairy-free, and the majority of our products are vegan as well, which means that we hit a much, much larger number of consumers.
Right.
So we've got a lot of customers who are just gluten-free, and they want sources that are certified as gluten-free, because a lot of sources, naturally are gluten-free. But if you're if you really suffer with gluten intolerance or celiac disease, and have the allergy to gluten, then you need something that you can trust, which is a certified product, which is what we do. So,
and what I find is, not to use the most severe term comorbidities, but people with one dietary restriction sometimes have other dietary restrictions as well. And I was just on the podcast for the Canadian Celiac, or the Canadian Celiac podcast, and we were talking about, there's a ton of apps that are out there if you want to find gluten-free food, for example. But what happens if you're gluten-free and have a dairy intolerance? What happens if you're gluten-free and, maybe you also have IBS and you need to get low FODMAP, right? Where do you go then for the answers? And that's something Honeycomb has, tackled from day one, because we understand it's this plus that sometimes. And what I really like, I love the idea of having more dairy-free sauces on the shelf, and gut-friendly sauces on the shelf, most definitely, because I think it's so needed, and just disappointment in my eyes every time I go to the supermarket and I look at the ingredients and I'm like, oh, it contains like modified milk or something like that, and I'm like, oh, I don't want another cheat day.
No, I know exactly what you mean. And that's another reason why we certified for all of these different areas, but also why we focus so much on taste of our products, and the branding and things, because we're like, well, people are compromising enough. We want them to be able to enjoy it, but also that sat around a table with a family, you might have someone that's decided to be vegetarian, you've got someone with IBS, you've got someone that's celiac, or someone that's celiac and got IBS or something, and you end up having to cook 5 or 6 different meals a night, and actually you all want to just enjoy one meal together. And that's another reason of why I really wanted to focus on making good tasting food that everyone can enjoy, whether you're low FODMAP or not.
What I'd like to see is every family having, whether or not they have people who in their family who require low FODMAP or gluten-free or vegan or dairy. If you think about your group of friends, if you think about your extended family or your family, if you think about your coworkers, if you think about anyone in your life, it's not going to take you very long to find someone who has any of those issues, or any of those restrictions. So I think it would make sense in every pantry, whether or not you even use it, just to have it, because you never know when you're going to have a guest who comes in. Obviously, post-COVID, when we have guests again coming over, you just never know. And to have this, I think, is really useful, because it's not just a plant-based. It's not just gluten-free. It's not. It really covers sort of the big problematic, restrictive diets and so on. So I guess I have a question for you. Where do you see the food industry and restaurant industry as well, just to if you have an opinion on that, where do you see that going over the coming years? We've seen, the rise of gluten-free. We've seen the rise of plant-based. We've seen the rise of keto and paleo before that. Are we seeing the rise of gut-friendly foods? Is that what we're seeing right now, just the beginning of it? Or how do you see that pan out?
Definitely. Yeah, no, we're seeing the rise of it. It was, I can't remember, a couple of years ago, 2018, I think, someone wrote an article in The Grocer, which is the UK's kind of biggest trade magazine in the food industry, saying how the low FODMAP diet was tipped to become bigger than gluten-free, because more people suffer with IBS and these types of ingredients to do with gluten and celiac disease. And actually, it's proven even more by studies that people are doing now, where they're showing that people that think that they've got a gluten intolerance are actually intolerant to fructans as part of the low FODMAP diet, and it's
Right.
actually that they should be looking at, not the glutens.
Wow.
I'm not a dietitian or scientist or anything, so I can't give you the exact detail of that, but it's something to do with the part of wheat or whatever it is that they're intolerant to is actually the fructan, not the gluten or something like that. But
Interesting.
so yeah, it's tipped to become a lot bigger, and gut health in the UK is one of the biggest trends at the moment. So gluten-free is huge anyway, but it's been around for
Right.
quite a while now. So gut health is definitely the latest one that's on the radar. It's what everyone's talking about. It's
Right.
things like Food Matters Live, like I was talking about earlier, the big innovation show and things. Gut health is a massive part of that at the moment, and I think it's just set to become bigger.
Right. I mean, my GI, and I mean, I want to sort of give a disclaimer for this joke, but I mean, we're on a podcast about IBS, so bear with me. But he's saying that we would have world peace if all the world leaders had good bowel movements in one day. And and I think he's kind of right. The future that I see is like, well, maybe these gut issues that we're having don't need to. Maybe this is just part of the evolution of all of the new types of food that we've been eating over the past century, and how food has changed, and maybe now we're evolving to smarter food, food that can taste amazing but doesn't actually have to hurt us. And it feels like we sort of think that those two just go hand in hand. That if you have tasty food, it has to hit you after with the food hangover. But maybe it doesn't have to be like that. And I envision, we see on menus all the time GF, we see V, we see VG, and frankly, sometimes GF isn't even what it seems to be, because a lot of people who are celiac can't even have GF items if there's cross contamination and so on. So there's still a lot of education to be done there. But on on the menus, I would love to see, this is the gut health, get the gut health option, get the option that's going to make you feel better. I think, we see on the menus today GF, we see V, we see VG, these little insignias that go on the menu. And if you have almost anything else, talk to our server, give us a call, play ingredient Tetris, play Russian roulette. It's very much like the minimum requirements for restaurant is putting VG, VGF, and even GF arguably is not really useful for a lot of celiacs, because it doesn't really show if you accommodate for cross-contamination issues and so on. But I would really like to see, and sometimes if you're very lucky, you might see an NF, which stands for nut-free. Which nut, we don't really know. But, this is sort of the beginning of restaurants, when they are trying to accommodate, they do that. And I would love to see restaurants start adding options for people who have IBS, who have IBD, to say this is a gut-friendly version. Or to say this is a low FODMAP version, or, because I think low FODMAP, some people might not even get it if they haven't been diagnosed with low FODMAP. But if you just say this is a gut health version or gut friendly version, that might bring things to the forefront. And so I don't know how you feel about that, but I imagine if you saw that at a restaurant, you'd probably be a huge fan of that restaurant.
Definitely, yeah. I would love that to happen. There is a restaurant actually in the UK who have a low FODMAP menu. I believe they're up in Scotland, so I haven't actually
Okay.
visited it yet, because that's about a 7-hour drive for me.
Right.
So I'd have to be, very keen to go there to drive
These
for
are
that one.
like these are like
But no,
Buddhist
it would
monasteries now to go and like, oh, I'm gonna go to the FODMAP restaurant retreat.
yeah.
It's so far away.
uh, it would be great, and it's something we're considering as part of Bay's Kitchen, of looking at the food service industry, and can we get some of our products being used in restaurants and things so that they can put low FODMAP dishes on the menu and stuff. I
Right.
think the whole intolerance and allergy piece, I get, is incredibly difficult for a restaurant. In food retail, where you're using manufacturing site, you can make, however many thousands of the same product on one production run and do all your cross-contamination, clean downs and segregation of ingredients and everything really easily. But in a restaurant, you'd have to have completely separate ingredients, cooking areas,
Yeah.
and everything for allergies. So I can completely understand why that's so difficult. But yeah, if someone could do it, I know it. So many people that would be a huge fan. I know I've
Yeah.
got people that friends that suffer with nut allergies, which to eat out is just a massive risk
Yeah.
anyway with any restaurant
Yeah.
really. With celiac disease, the same. With low FODMAP, I think I think my issue with it is the lack of ingredients that you get on menus, and so and the fact that the servers aren't going to say,
Right.
they're not going to know, right, that there is onion and garlic and lactose and wheat and this and that and that,
Right.
in these dishes. But if there was a way that um I don't know, you could almost look at that menu online or something and click in, and you could see exactly what was in each dish. You could make a more informed choice of which dishes would be more suitable for me to eat. I
Right.
go on a lot of guesswork of, right, that's quite a creamy based dish, so I'm not going to have that one because there's going to be way too much lactose in it. That's not going to agree with me. That one, I can ask for the sauce on the side and then determine whether I think it's going to be all right. And so you can make a few decisions, but if you could see the full kind of ingredient breakdown of each
Right.
dish, you'd know.
Your mission is to increase the awareness of IBS as well, and to remove the taboo that surrounds it. And part of that is probably making it cool and having a nice brand and having a good social media presence. And do you feel that I feel that you're accomplishing the mission, and you're doing a great job of it. How do you think there's a long way to go? Do you think this is a lifelong mission? Do you think we're going to see a lot of change in the next couple years, 5 years, 10 years? What's your prediction for us to get rid of the taboo?
I think we've come a long way. I think I'm succeeding in the mission all the time, just from the amazing customer reviews we get. I think that's one thing that's always kept me going. So for doing a startup business, there are challenges along the way, and there's a lot of times you want to give up, and it's those
Mm,
customer reviews that keep you going, and just the emails. Occasionally when someone will actually sit and take the time to write you this amazing email that tells you how you've helped their family. And we've got a review on Google, I think it is, that says how we've pretty much saved her marriage, because it means that her and her husband can
wow.
actually eat the same meals every night, and there's
What
no
an email.
arguments anymore
What
of
a
what they're going to eat.
testimonial.
I
Wow.
know. It's a slow burner. I think it's the same as
Okay.
the low FODMAP diet, and just getting that awareness out there. It's happening, but it's slowly.
Got it.
And I would say, I mean, yeah, I would probably predict 5 to 10 years it's going to take for gut health and IBS and everything, and low FODMAP diet to sort of take over the world. I would say we've come a very long way in the last 5 years since I was diagnosed, or 6 years. But I think there's still, yeah, a very long way to go. Like you say, even if people have heard of FODMAP, they still have no clue what it is,
Right.
unless you're having to follow it yourself.
Right.
So
And so anyone can go to, if they want to order from you, they can order from you from your website, and do you ship internationally as well?
we don't ourselves, but we
Okay.
have an export partner called British Corner Shop who
Okay.
do, and they ship all over the world. But if you go to our website, you've got the shop on there. So if you're in the UK, you can order on our shop, and there's also a find your local store page on there, and that lists all of our stockists, and there's a whole international section. So British Corner Shop are listed on there, but as well as there, we have got retailers in Lots of European countries, even Australia, Dubai.
Awesome.
No one in the US just yet, but
Okay.
it's on our
Any
radar.
in Canada?
No, not
Okay,
yet.
well, maybe I'll send a couple emails. We might have some contacts here, so we'll see what we can do.
That would be fantastic. Yeah, we'd
Yeah.
love to.
So any
It's
listeners
on
can
our
go.
list.
Yeah, listeners can go to bayskitchen.com. That's BAYS kitchen.com. And as Bay said, you can go and check out a variety of different online retailers and local retailers as well. I have a question. It says that you're, my notes here, that you're really into gin. What's your favorite gin?
Good question. There's a brand called Whitley Neal, and it's their raspberry one. I love that. But basically, pretty much any flavored gin. I'm really into flavored gin at the minute. Yeah,
I have
not your standard gin, but just your flavored ones.
I have this like special Hendrix
limited
that's
edition. A good point. Hendrix is good.
Yeah, I just like smell it sometimes. I'm like, oh, this is great. Anyway, I promise I'm not an alcoholic. Don't worry, listeners. Anyways, it was any final thoughts before we wrap up here?
No, it's been great to talk to you. I'm really excited to look more into honeycomb as well and see more about what you guys are up to. But yeah, thank you for listening to me waffle on all about Bay's Kitchen.
Thank you so much, Bay. I really appreciate it.
No worries. Thanks so much.
Bay's Kitchen produces award-winning, certified, low-FODMAP, IBS-friendly, gluten-free, dairy-free foods, many of which are vegan. Head to bayskitchen.com to check out their selection of sauces, soups, gravies, and more. Thai green curry, tikka masala, katsu curry. These are just some of the amazing flavors that they have available. Once again, head to bayskitchen.com. That's BAYS kitchen.com and sign up for their newsletter to get 10% off your first order.